Is it time to sell, or are the 49ers still contenders? That is the question of the night, amongst others. And I got my guy Sunil joining me to answer those questions. And we're going to do so next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Thursday night, which I would normally say, which means I'm joined by So Real Sunil, but this is a new night for us. So going forward, if Sunil and I do shows, it's usually going to be on a Thursday, unless he's a fill-in for a post game. But it is so good to talk to you twice in a week after not talking for a month or so. How you doing, brother?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. It's been crazy to see all the drama from this week. A lot of content's been created. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
I've been on it, right?
I would say so. A lot of content has definitely been created. And you know what? One of them was created last night when I did a show with Grant, and I asked him to put out a poll. I actually haven't checked to see how that poll was doing, but I gotta imagine, I think I know the answer to the poll. We'll see what the percentages are. But the question I wanted him to put out there, and the same question I'm going to ask you, is one of them has to go at the end of the season. Kyle or Brock? Which one are you moving on from, and which one are you keeping and moving forward with? And why?
There's not push everything out one more year and see what you
got. Nope. This is an A. I mean, that's the right answer, by the way. I think that is the right. That's what I would do. But yeah, you got to choose one. This is like F, marry, kill, except for there's only two choices.
Yeah. And I guess the caveat I would ask Jesse is, when you say one of them is gone, so if you keep Purdy, are you signing him to a long-term contract, or
he's just on the team in 2025? You can figure out what you want to do with him going forward. Same thing with Kyle. I mean, obviously, you could fire Kyle after 2025 if you want.
Okay. So none of this is long-term. It's just for next year.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, then I'm sticking with Kyle.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Yeah. What's the reasoning?
So, I mean, I do think that the hot seat, like Kyle's seat, is getting hot. Like, I'm not, the rope that I'm giving Kyle isn't as long as it used to be. Because obviously, the team isn't playing up to par. I've always been pretty consistent with, hey, if this team is competitive and potentially is competing for Super Bowls, you can't fire a coach in that realm. And I don't think that they're going to be competing for a Super Bowl this year. So, but I do think that Kyle Shanahan gives you a better chance to compete for a Super Bowl than Brock Purdy does. And I just think that there's like short-term solutions that are potentially out there that they could bring in and still be competitive. Whereas if you get rid of Kyle, you're implementing a whole new system. So if I'm just looking for, and I'm assuming we're talking about 2025 success. So I think that bringing in a new coach will be harder to get back to the Super Bowl than bringing in a new quarterback, because Kyle's shown that he could win with a multitude of quarterbacks. We don't know if Brock Purdy can pick up a new system and win with that immediately, type of thing.
I think it's actually a fair answer. I think you laid it out very well. I disagree with you, but I think that's actually a fair. I do. Because I can see where you're coming from. Like, Kyle has won with way worse, not only just like comparable quarterbacks, right? He's won with way worse quarterbacks than Brock Purdy. We all agree Jimmy G was a lot worse than Brock, and he won with Jimmy G. So, if he gets a Sam Darnold or a Kirk Cousins next offseason, you could see them being a good team with Kyle and that quarterback pairing. You don't necessarily know with Brock. I guess the way that I see it is, it's no secret what I think about Brock and that I wouldn't pay him long term. But I also do think it's fair to say that we are in year 3 with Brock and he still has room to grow. And I think it would be a shame to move on from that growth before we see exactly what he blooms into. So to me, I would like to see that through. With Kyle, I know what he is. And you're right. What he is without Brock has been able to make it to a Super Bowl and NFC championship. That is fair. But I don't know that Kyle can win a Super Bowl with the way that he coaches. And I also don't know that Kyle's not stubborn enough to change the way that he is. So I would go with Brock, but I don't know that I would be confident in it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think this is a. I think both of us agree that the right answer is, go into next season with both of them. I don't know what Kyle's contract situation is. I don't know when he's signed through. Do you know that offhand, Jesse? Like how many more years he has? Because I know
I
they're
want to
real
say
a
I
couple
want to
years.
say it goes through 2027, I think.
Wasn't it tied to Brock Purdy? Like when
No,
his
no, no, no,
contract ran out, that I thought they timed. I thought it ended up timing that way, but so you're
no.
saying so he has what 3 more years on his contract then?
Yeah, I want to say 3 years after this year. Yeah,
Yeah.
it might
So I
be
mean,
2, but it's longer than Brock. I do know that.
okay. I mean, look, I'm a self-proclaimed Shanistan, but I also now, it's hard to defend. Like ultimately, like the team is regressing.
Mhm.
Um, and for all the times I want to put the team's success on Kyle Shanahan, you have to put the team's failure on Kyle Shanahan as well. Like he can't just be all take all the good and not get any of the bad. So ultimately, I do think that the ticking that you have to start looking at. Hey, it's a potential that maybe the team gets better if Kyle isn't on isn't the coach. I think there's no validity to maybe the team. Maybe I know there's this narrative, Jesse, that the team might be tuning him out or his message isn't as strong. I think it's more kind of potentially what you mentioned. I think the league is starting to figure out the 49ers more since they've
Mhm.
been at the helm. Like if you're in the NFC, you're building your team to beat the 49ers, and that's just the fact. Like and so when you have everybody looking at you and as, hey, you're the standard, you're the team that we have to go beat. If you're not if you're not making the necessary adjustments that you need to make to combat that, which I think Kansas City does an amazing job of, 49ers just haven't. And a lot of that is, unfortunately for Kyle Shanahan, he hasn't been able to keep the continuity of the coaching staff the way like where it needs to be. Like, Kansas City hasn't gotten too many coaches kind of picked from them to the extent they have, obviously, but to the extent the 49ers have in that same time period. And that goes to Kyle Shanahan, that look, he's made some hires that maybe and himself haven't evolved in a way that at least this year they're still dominating. So but in that scenario, I'm still going Kyle Shanahan over Brock Purdy because um I know what I'm getting. Like you mentioned, you're going off of hope that Brock Purdy can be the same
For
quarterback
sure.
without Kyle Shanahan. I'm going with, I know who Kyle Shanahan is. I know he's going to be able to put together a competitive team if he has the pieces that he needs.
Yeah, and the reason I'm going with the hope is because if that hope comes through, maybe that could result in a Super Bowl victory. I feel like Kyle's reached his ceiling as far as how far he's going to get with this team. With this team, I could see him going somewhere else and potentially getting a fresh break and starting over and maybe sitting back, taking a year off and learning. But I just feel like in this scenario, he's maxed out. And maybe Brock's max without Kyle is wild card. I don't know, but maybe it is winning a Super Bowl. So that's what I'd be going off of. PGZ's a Seahawks fan. We're actually going to answer that question. We are going to answer that question here very, very shortly. So I want to make sure. And then we're also going to end the show with why we are confident that Brock and Kyle can turn it around. So we're going to start and end the show with a Brock and Kyle topic. Dave Barclay, thank you, Dave. I really appreciate you. He says, Jesse, I just pulled in the driveway. Great timing. I love what you do, so keep it up. You're a rock star. You know my feeling on everything, and I'm tired of people saying I'm on the Fire Kyle train. No, I started the train. Fair enough. You've been on it for a long time. So you have started the Fire Lyle train, actually, which is pretty interesting as well. Okay. And I really appreciate you for the super chat. Do you believe losing to the Cowboys would be officially rock bottom for this team?
I mean, it's low. I don't know if it's rock bottom in the sense that just at least what's it called? Mathematically, they could, they still have the division to be able to win, and they still play every single team, one more time. So, and it's not like there's anybody that's running away with the division either. So I don't know if that's necessarily rock bottom. But as far as Super Bowl contention, which I think both of us are judging it based off of, yeah, I mean, I think it does put you out of uh, having confidence that you're going to be able to win a Super Bowl. I mean, you're doing the same, like, okay, losing to Kansas City, we're used to them losing to Kansas City. We're not used to them losing to the Cowboys. So if
There it
they
is.
still can't beat Kansas City, but now they're also losing to Cowboys, is like that's once again moving in the wrong direction. So I wouldn't say it's rock bottom, because just mathematically they could still make the playoffs and all of that. I think, but I do think that when it comes to the decisions that you make, and the ultimate question, should Jay be buyers or sellers, I think last game already gave you enough information to make those choices.
Yeah.
But obviously losing to the Cowboys as well, I think further would give you further confirmation that what that decision should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about that. But I do believe that I do believe Dallas would officially be rock bottom. Like I feel like we're close already. And to your point, we should know what direction this team should go going forward. But Dallas is officially rock bottom if they lose that game, because the 49ers have injuries. I agree. But it looks like Bland's not going to play. It looks like Parsons not going to play. They have some injuries of their own. And quite frankly, if the team that lost, what did they lose? 42-10 last year. We've knocked them out of the playoffs twice over the last few years. Dak Prescott cannot find his footing whatsoever against the San Francisco 49ers. If Dak Prescott comes on the road, leads them to victory, and they end up winning that game against the 49ers, I feel like that's it. Like, what? Because we don't take the Cowboys seriously. I don't anyways. I don't take them seriously, and I don't think that we should take them seriously until they win a game. They are desperate against the 49ers, and in fact, last year they were desperate, and that desperation turned into 42-10, much like our desperation against the Chiefs turned into 27-18 or whatever this final score was. But I mean, they beat the brakes off us. The score wasn't as bad as Dallas, but they got us. You can't lose that way, Dallas. Have Kittle with the F Dallas shirt and all the stuff. Coming full circle a year later, if that's the team that beats us and puts us at 3-5, spiraling, heading into the bye week, I just feel like that's it. It's rock bottom for them. Like that is officially as low as it can go. Any loss from here on out wouldn't be as sad as that one.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a worse version of the Cowboys that we beat from last season, right?
Sure.
They're not as good as they were last season, to some of the points you were making. So ultimately, yeah, I mean, it's hard to look, if when you lose that game, to see the hope, like you're always looking for, okay, well, what can we take from this that could give us maybe some things to get excited about moving forward. Losing to a worse version of the Cowboys, who are themselves, and their fan base questioning, what needs to be done with their team and whatnot. If they end up, beating the 49ers and like let's say it's even let's go worst case scenario, like whooping the 49ers. Yeah, I mean that I don't know, like I said, rock bottom because they still ultimately can make the playoffs. You can't
Yeah.
say it's rock bottom, but I mean, it's hard to it's already there's already like a less than 5% chance that you think the 49ers could win the Super Bowl. I mean, it would be damn near 0%, close to 0% if they get whooped by the Cowboys. So yeah, I'm with you on
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking at like the rest of the schedule. And let's see. So if they're 3-5, lose at the Cowboys, you've got 9 games left. Just to get to 10 wins, you'd have to go
7-2
8-1, 7-2. Am I right? 7-2. Yeah,
because they're
because they have
three.
three. They're 3. You're right. Yeah. So 7-2 against that schedule down the stretch. I mean, that's.
The only thing is they've done it so many times. It's hard. You can't say that they can't. You know what I
I'm
mean?
not saying they can't, but let's look at it. You've got in no particular order, right? Tampa looks very at this point because they lost both their receivers. That's a very winnable game. I get that. And then Seattle, obviously, but if Dallas beats you and you always beat Seattle, like who knows, right?
Well,
So,
let's just say let's say they still have 3 with the division. Let's say
yeah,
they run
you got
3.
Buffalo on the road coming off a bye.
So let's
You
say
got
that's the
Green Bay.
winnable one. Yeah.
Yeah, you got
So I mean,
Detroit.
I think 2 of those are. I think that all I'm saying is that none of those teams look at the 49ers and say I'm excited to play them either. That's all I'm saying. The 49er has the edge outside of Buffalo, right? They don't play Buffalo that often, but Green
Yeah,
Bay mentally still has to get over the 49er hump. They've lost every single time that they played. Detroit is going to be, I mean, the team that Green Bay has right now, right? That coach. Obviously they have what happened in the playoffs last season. Detroit, same thing. It's going to be a get back game for them. But like mentally, I mean, there's things to. Now I'm over here looking for reasons to find hope and whatnot. But no, I mean, like, look, if they lose to the Cowboys, I'm just arguing with you that it's not necessarily rock bottom, but
for
I
sure. I
agree with
see what
you
you're saying.
that obviously the season to both of us is not what we wanted it to be.
But admitting it's rock bottom is how you can enter recovery, right? So rock bottom doesn't have to be a
I
bad
don't
thing
know.
necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to rehab after that game, but hopefully, sometime during the season we might have to.
Marco wants to know, can I touch on Forrester's comments? I wish I had the quote in front of me, but he was asked by Grant, and I think it was actually your question. You asked Grant, Marco, to ask him the question. Anyways, it was about player personnel packages and why do they throw so much out of 11 personnel and all those things. And Forrester gave a really good answer. I like Forrester because he always gives just a ton of insight. But his answer was basically like, if you have a quarterback and wide receivers that can dictate things, then you can run out of certain personnel packages. And if you don't, then you can't. Which basically he was saying either they don't have the quarterback or wide receiver or both. And that's why they don't run a lot out of 11 personnel is what I got from it. Dave says, MMK says Brock and Jimmy have similar numbers. Does that mean they are both mid or is it Lyle? Again, numbers are one thing for sure, but just the eye test says Brock's a better player than Jimmy. That being said, we know what Jimmy is without Kyle. He's a backup quarterback in the NFL. He's not a top 32 quarterback, which is kind of crazy to think that he had a 5-game stretch. The final 5 games he had with the 49ers were his best he had ever played with the San Francisco 49ers. And then the very next season, he couldn't even keep a starting job with the Raiders. That's what he is without Kyle. Now, what's Brock without Kyle? I think to Sunil's point, he would rather not find out. That's why he would move on with Kyle. I would prefer to find out, but it is possible that he's, borderline a starter in this league. It's possible that he could be better without Kyle. Who knows? But we know what Jimmy is without Kyle. That's factual.
And I think to the last part, I'm sure from his reputation, this is a dig at Kyle. But I would say I actually look at that as a positive. I mean, every quarterback that comes into Kyle's system looks better, and that's including like a guy like Matt Ryan, who you
Mhm.
know won
Who was good, but won an
MVP,
MVP with
won an
Kyle. Yeah.
MVP with Kyle. We saw with Jimmy. Jimmy went from somebody who people were saying is a top 10 quarterback, highest paid quarterback in the league at the time, and all this kind of stuff, to somebody who got popped for PEDs and suspended, and couldn't even keep a job, a starting job with the Raiders. So yeah, I mean, I do think that Kyle's system makes quarterbacks look better, makes running backs look better, makes like everybody look better. So I do think that's actually what's it called? That's something in Kyle's favor, that his system does help make the game easier for certain positions.
Corey says, "What's up, Jesse? Love your content. Even as a Seahawks fan, I appreciate you. It's interesting. I think a lot of opposing fan bases do like my content. They feel like I keep it real. 49er fans, a lot of them don't like my content because they feel like I hate Brock Purdy. So
Yeah.
you guys call it keeping it
49ers.
real. Other opposing fan bases call it keeping real. 49er fans call it hating my own team. So I don't know. I'm caught somewhere in the middle." He says, "How do you feel about the Hawks adding Ernest Jones at linebacker and having right tackle Abe Lucas practice again this week and getting healthy at the right time?" First of all, very happy for Abe Lucas. It was starting to look really weird there that he might be done. And that would be unfortunate because he showed a lot of promise as a young player. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So I hope just for the person that he's able to stay healthy and resume his career and be good. Ernest Jones he's interesting. He showed a lot of really good things with the Rams. He came into camp out of shape, and the Rams moved on from him. We'll see where he's at. He does seem like a better fit for the Seahawks and what they want to do. So we'll see what that ends up being. But I got to be honest, Corey, I have not like stood up for Seattle over the last 2 years because I hope you guys lose every game for all I care. But looking at the roster and trying to be objective, I feel like the roster has been there last year and this year. And I felt like the coaches held this team back last year. I feel like if it continues to be an issue, maybe I have overvalued the roster. And quite frankly, y'all can't beat the 49ers. And until you do that, I can't take the team seriously. So I love the additions. Again, the roster is not the issue to me. Those are good additions and make the roster even better, in my opinion. But until you can beat the 49ers, I can't look at you and say, all right, this team can really compete even for the division. That's just my opinion. I got to see it first. Dave says, "We lose to the Cowboys. It is over. I've called our losses this year, and I really want to say we're going to lose this game, but I just can't imagine it. But Lyle, every year we might lose 7 to 10 games." 7, that's a pretty wide range. I mean, 7
No,
to
I think
10.
he's saying 7 and 10 is going to be the record.
Oh, okay. I thought he said we might lose. Okay, you might be right. Dazza says, "Why do people seem excited about winning the division? At the start of the year, we were Super Bowl and bust, and this team doesn't look like a Super Bowl team." We're going to talk about that, actually. Dazza says, "Also, can people stop saying that they've made a late season run in the past? This isn't the same team as previous years. We're banged up and players look emotionally drained and uninterested." I also want to point out that when they made those late season runs or those pushes after starting slow, those are also the years that they lost in the NFC Championship and did not make the Super Bowl. So that being said, all right, let's actually talk. I'll do it a little bit different order than what I was going to, but Dazza brought up the division and basically how we shouldn't be happy with just winning the division. And my question to you is have you lowered your expectations on what you had initially to start the season? So I'll give you an example. My expectations have lowered because I said this team at best was a 12-5 team that would make it to the NFC Championship. That was my opinion. At worst, I thought they were a 10-win team that could make it to and lose in the divisional round. Like that was worst case scenario. Now I look at this team and I think that's best case scenario. I think 10 wins, loss in a divisional round is best case. Worst case is not even making the playoffs. So my expectations of this team have lowered based off of what I've seen. But on the flip side, like that doesn't give them an excuse. I'm not going to be happy with that. I just don't expect them to go as far as what I initially thought. Have your expectations lowered based off of this start?
Yeah, I mean, I expected this team to compete for a Super Bowl. They're not as good as I thought that they would be. And to be honest, I think that was, even if everybody was healthy, I still think that they weren't performing at the level that I would expect them to be. Now, obviously, we haven't had CMC, so how are you saying that? I mean, I think Mason has filled in. He's obviously not CMC, but I think that he's played the position well enough to where you shouldn't be struggling the way that the team has struggled in the red zone and things of that nature. So yeah, I think ultimately that this team isn't as good as my expectations going into the season have been. Have I lowered my expectations? No, my expectation is still a Super Bowl. I just don't have any confidence that they're going to make it there. So I guess my expectations are lowered, but it's more that I just think that it's a quote unquote failed season.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I don't know. To me, like, do you remember? Let's take all the facts out of it and just go full feelings here, okay?
Yeah,
Because
that's the
I
best
think
way I work.
yeah, no, it's a good way to live life. It's a really good way to live life. But feelings, just to be fair, feelings I had in the at training camp was that there was something off with this team. And I think that's proven to be true to this point. I mean, it just has. I don't know how you could deny it. But last year, the feeling I genuinely had was like, this same time last year, we're like, this team may not lose a game all year. Like those are the conversations we were having. The way that they started, it's like, are they going to lose this year? Oh, I mean, what's more likely? They lose 3 games or 0 games. Like it was just crazy conversations. Now, obviously, we know they ended up losing and went on the 3-game losing streak. But even then, after the 3-game losing streak, nobody lost confidence in this team.
Yeah.
Like the conversations were completely different. Even going into the bye week last year on a 3-game losing streak, if they win this weekend and are 4-4, I still feel like people are going into the bye feeling a lot worse off a win than we were feeling off of a 3-game losing streak the year prior. And that's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, but I think that goes more towards the horses, right?
Mm.
So, where the team has always been able to never be out talented, that's not the case anymore, right? We don't have a bona fide wide receiver 1 anymore. Our you know Jennings has kind of been our best receiver. He's still out. CMC, obviously, our best offensive weapon. He's probably he's looking like they're not even opening up the window for him. So is he even going to play this season? So I think last season, even though there was that 3-game losing streak, you still knew that this team was better than everybody else's team because of the roster that we have. And like when you're saying, hey, stuff is off, obviously there was a very tumultuous off season with all of the negotiations and all of that kind of stuff. But going in on paper, you still felt like, hey, this team has all the talent to be able to compete. So even if there's a slow start, all this type of stuff, like they'll be able to figure it out because they have the talent, right? And
Yeah.
now you don't feel that because you're not confident that the talent is there anymore, right? So what are they going to get back? Now you're hoping, hey, maybe a Ricky Pearsall can, elevate, or a Cowing, or now it's all like hope versus I am confident that this roster can figure it out. I'm sure even the team doesn't have that confidence, Jesse, because some of the pieces that are being in there, they haven't gone through those battles together like in previous years, because these are new rookies, these are new additions that have come from other teams, so on and so forth. So I think that's more what it is versus just like anything else, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, to me though, I mean, yeah, it was obviously tumultuous and whatever, but they got everybody back for week one. And then they started out week one hot, so it did look good. But it was just being at those practices, man. It was different. It was just so different. Last year, you could just tell there was a swagger to this team. They had redemption on their mind, the way that they lost to the Eagles because Brock Purdy couldn't finish the game. And they just seemed so confident. And this year, man, the practices every day, it was like practice was flat again today. Oh, it was good for a half of practice and then it got flat again. There was just this feeling at those practices at training camp that it was like, something's off. Something is off. And I kept saying, well, maybe it's because, like Ayuk's not there. And last year he was the energy. So maybe that's it. But one player shouldn't be able to throw the vibes off that much, in my opinion. Because even last year, Bosa wasn't there all of camp, and that didn't matter, man. If Bosa wasn't there and Brock was working back from a serious injury, and that did not impact any sort of vibe that they had, or feeling, or effort, or just anything. You could tell that team was on a mission, and this year it just was not there, man. Something was
Yeah.
off, and it's been that way.
I think a part of it is, I think there's people use arrogance a lot, and I do think that there is some arrogance there, and you got to point to the leader of the team, which is Kyle Shanahan. If that arrogance is there, I mean, you remember they went on that. I mean, Debo, I think, was the biggest person that was going on that little press run talking about we're the best team, even though we lost, we still feel like we're the best team, all that type of stuff. I think that ultimately that catches up with you because it makes you think that, hey, we don't need to work as hard maybe. And I'm not saying that the team isn't working hard. I'm just saying that, like, if you have that mentality that everything you're just better than everybody, which you were at that point, the moment that that doesn't happen because now you don't have all of the horses there that you're usually used to doing there, like that, I think changes a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Corey, this is a very good point. The Chiefs, I understand. It's interesting because I had this crazy growth on the channel in March, and it all came from the Super Bowl reaction video. Out of nowhere, I got like 40,000 views on that thing, and it was all Chiefs, all Chiefs fans are like, I love this guy. This is a great reaction. I'm subbing to the channel, and a few of them have certainly stuck around through the beginning of this season. And now that the 49ers lost again, they just absolutely love it. So, that's what happens. Eddie G says, Jesse, what's your take on John York showing up at camp this week? No surprise. No surprise. It was a joke that was made on Grant's channel on Tuesday, and then he shows up on Wednesday. A super chat came in and talked about it. And we're like, yeah, no surprise if he shows up, and he did. So this is what he does. He's there to assess. He's there to put pressure on the team and coaches and everything. And it's worked in the past. We'll see what happens this year. But that shouldn't be a surprise, right? We've seen this before, Sunil.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when he's in town, he's at the practices. I don't think it's. I mean, I think the timing of everything makes people, look at it. Hey, is this something abnormal or whatnot? But he's been there. Even he's gone to practices even when the team's doing well. So I think it's his team. He wants to see what's going on. Maybe it's a pressure push. Hopefully, like, I mean, obviously things need to change. So if you're any type of CEO of a company, you gotta go there and try to make changes. If you're the best person to make those changes or put that pressure, I guess.
Yeah, listen, we are definitely teetering if Raiders Nation is showing up and bragging, because we see how bad that team is. But again, it's rock bottom if we lose to the Dallas Cowboys, because getting their fan base in here would be awful. So that's when it's it's officially rock bottom. And Dave, your super chat was promoting the previous question that I actually answered. Okay, let's get to the meat of the show. Buyers or sellers? The thumbnail is a yard sale with a bunch of 49ers players on it. The question is, and it's interesting for the 49ers, the way their bye week falls, also when the trade deadline, because it was pushed back this year. So the trade deadline is November 5th. The 49ers are on a bye. So this is their last game that they have. Last game to assess what this team is going to be before the trade deadline, and they're going to have to make some serious decisions. So, do you feel like the 49ers should be buyers or sellers? Or, unlike the first question, there is a third option, which is let's wait and see what happens this weekend before making a decision.
I mean, I don't think there's anything that could happen in the game, Jesse, that would make me want them to be buyers. And what I mean by that is like ultimately you went all in on this roster this offseason and just stick with it. I mean, if you can get good picks, like I'm talking, if you could get obviously any kind of first round pick you could get for anybody, I would take it. Because ultimately, the way that I look at it is this team isn't good enough to win a Super Bowl. So you got to just be looking at the future and assets and things like that. I don't think you want to put any money on your books moving forward unless you can get like a young player that you know can be part of a foundation. Um, but ultimately, to me, I don't know what would happen in this game. Like, even let's say the 49ers win 40-0. Does that to the Cowboys? Does that make me think that they're a Super Bowl? They're going to win the Super Bowl? No, I mean, the talent, the caliber that you need to beat to win a Super Bowl, they played last week and they didn't look like they were going to be able to beat them. So to me, they've already kind of shown that, hey, this is probably not the year. You obviously, have some devastating injuries this season. So I would, if it's buyers or sellers, you have to choose one. I'm selling, but ultimately, to me, what selling to me means, Jesse, is uh, shelving CMC for the whole season. Don't even risk him tearing one of his Achilles. Like, just let him rest. Play the rookies, right, and give the rookies some meaningful playing time. And if there's certain pieces that you don't think are going to be part of your foundation moving forward due to finances and all that type of stuff, those guys, if you could get trade assets for them, trade them. Like, that's to me what selling is, not necessarily like actively shopping everybody, but if people call you and say, hey, is Debo available? We're willing to give you a third round or a second conditional third that could turn into a second. I'm saying, yeah, let's do that, because I don't think they look at Debo moving forward that, he's the guy or whatever the case may be. I don't know. Maybe now that Ayuk got injured, maybe that changes things. But to me, that's what I'm looking at when I'm saying sellers. It's not necessarily actively selling parts, but not taking on anything and looking more towards the future as far as getting guys healthy for next season versus, trying to rush guys back. Like even a Drake Greenlaw, like let him sit out the whole season type of thing.
Trip Aces thinks that you sound like David Lombardi. It's interesting.
How?
Interesting take. I don't know. He said Excel spreadsheet, but I assume that's what he means. I don't know. I don't think you sound like him at all. Okay. So somebody in the chat does keep saying, let's see. Let me see. Oh, Trip Aces, I think. No, not Trip Aces. Sorry. That's the David Lombardi guy. Bang Dang keeps wondering who we should sell. And you gave a bit of an answer. I'm going to give a full plan here. I agree with you, Sunil, wholeheartedly that nothing is going to happen on Sunday that's going to change my mind. Like, beating Dallas doesn't impress me at all. They should beat Dallas. We own Dallas. We mentally own Dallas, more importantly. So losing to Dallas only further backs the point that we should be sellers, but beating Dallas literally does nothing. In fact, I expect Brock to play really good, and people will be like, see, it was just one bad game, and hasn't been all season, despite he has more turnovers than games played. And Debo's going to play great, and we're back. That's what I expect the feeling to be. So I expect to beat Dallas. So here's what I would say. My untouchables are Brock, Mason, Demo, Bosa, Warner, Jennings, and all of the rookies. Because, obviously rookies is way too early. Nobody trades rookies. That would be weird. So those are my untouchable players. The people I'm for sure trying to trade are two guys that are on one-year deals, and Charvarius Ward and Trey Greenlaw, and then also Debo Samuel. Now, I know that they just reworked Debo's deal, which makes it a lot tougher. But if you do it at the trade deadline, you're going to take part of the cap hit now and the other part next year. What I don't want to see happen is Ward and Greenlaw leave this team and we get nothing for them. So I'm trying to get something for them now. And Debo getting traded or cut at the end of the season and then eating the cap hit in 2025 and 2026 when we can be done with it 2025 and then looking forward in 2026. And then I'm going to put out feelers on CMC, Trent, and Kittle and see if there's anybody that will just massively overpay for any of those guys. That's what I would be looking to do if I'm the 49ers. And the reason that I'm doing it now versus seeing how the season plays out and making my move at the end of the season is if you do it that way, you're foregoing better compensation. Right now, teams that are competing are going to overpay by about a round versus what they would pay in the offseason. So if Debo's worth a 4th round pick around the league, right now people would probably pay a 3rd because they're trying to win a Super Bowl and they're excited about that. And they're willing to give more. Also, the reason I do it now versus the end of the season is, again, the cap hits. I want to take cap hits this year in 2025, and I want it all off the books starting 2026 so that I'm fresh. Because what I want to do is get as many high draft picks as I can, 3rd rounders, 4th rounders, what have you, and just as many shots at good players as I can, and then all the money off the books starting 2026 so that we're ready to rock and roll again as early as possible. I don't want to push any of this into 2026, have a down year in 2026, and then wait till 2027 to compete. So for me, that's why I'm making the decision now is I don't want to be down 2 years after this year. I want it to be 1 year and then competing again. That's my plan.
Did you say Fred Warner?
Untouchable.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. So people in the chat might have gotten confused that you said.
Let me say it again, and I may have misspoke. My untouchables, guys I'm not trading, are Brock, Mason, Demo, Bosa, Warner, Jennings. Those are my untouchables. For sure, guys I'm trading, Charvarius Ward, Dre Greenlaw, and Debo Samuel. I'm putting out feelers on CMC, Trent, and Kittle and see what I can get for them. If anybody's willing to give a 3rd or higher, I'm pulling the shoot on them as well. So those are the names.
So you saw the thing about Forrester, right? We just talked about it briefly here. Mm-hmm. Let's say that based off of some of the things that Kyle has done with Brock Purdy, I think it's safe to say that even though he trusts Brock Purdy more than maybe previous quarterbacks, that full trust isn't there, at least based off of how he calls plays and whatnot, right? If Brock Purdy is really, really good in their eyes, obviously they're winning, but because of his contract, and they know that at a different price point, maybe he's not as attractive to them.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make him non-untouchable, and that, hey, let's sell him high when people, have all of this belief in him? He's coming off of a Super Bowl appearance, NFC Championship game, whatever the case may be. Obviously, the 49ers are being sellers at this point. If you don't want to give him that long-term contract, shouldn't he be on the board as well?
The reason I say no is because he's super inexpensive next year. So that allows you to, what that's going to do is allow you to, one, take those cap hits and still have a team next year, right?
Yeah.
So that's number one. And number two, you're taking next year to assess with less talent around him for the full year and just double check. Put a second set of eyes on it before you fully make a decision on him. I would rather know for sure before I just get rid of him. Now I have an opinion on what direction I think it's going, but that doesn't mean that I'm right. And I'm not willing or arrogant enough to not see it for one more year before I make my final decision.
Yeah.
So that's why I would say he's untouched. And also the other reason is there's not a QB needy team that is like, oh, we were in the hunt. and now we're out of the hunt because we don't have a quarterback that would just like give you the farm. So it's like, what are you going to get realistically for Brock Purdy right
Yeah.
now in this moment? I mean, nothing that would make it worth it.
It's interesting though, because I mean, obviously, I don't think Purdy is in the caliber of Matt Stafford, but you do hear these rumors that there are some teams that are looking to get Matt Stafford. And
Yeah.
one of them I think was Minnesota, and I'm like, wow, Darnold's been playing pretty well over there, but
Yeah.
obviously, maybe they're seeing something that we aren't. But I don't know. I do agree with you. I don't think Purdy does get traded, but it's interesting to me because if they are already like, hey, we know that he's not the long term guy, that's one thing. But I also don't think that Kyle Shanahan is going to be afforded another quarterback, if that makes sense. Like another young quarterback, like
Yeah.
another run with a young quarterback. Maybe if a guy like Kirk Cousins becomes available, they might do a 1 year stopgap type of thing. But I think in the next 2 years, if this team doesn't get back to a Super Bowl or like look competitive for Super Bowls again, I doubt that Kyle Shanahan's even here. So that doesn't make sense for him to trade Brock Purdy either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kyle can't. This is it. He's tied at the hip with Brock.
Yeah.
Like that's and interestingly enough, doing the right thing as a coach, which is propping up your player, which is, I swear, the first time he's done it. He's actually propped up Brock a lot, which is pretty cool to see. Because sometimes I felt like, man, do you even have it in you? But he does go out of his way to prop Brock up a lot. But in doing so, you've also told 49er fans, like, hey, this guy's really, really good. And so if he's not really, really good, but you've already told 49er fans that, they're going to assume that you're the reason he's not really, really good. So that's just the reality of the situation. That's why I think most people, if given the opportunity to move on from Kyle or Brock, would choose Kyle because they're like, well, you told us that he's really good. You're the problem. It's just the way that people are going to view it. And I don't think they're wrong for viewing it that way. 808 Niner says, sell. I have been out on this team after Brock didn't throw the slant to BA. I know it's beating a dead horse, but literally sums up Kyle's tenure. We are Charlie Brown and never gonna kick that ball.
That's a good
Yeah, it was a good analogy. Last year, I I think a lot of us felt like last year was the last best chance. So we'll see. Hopefully we're all wrong. Dave Barclay says, people freaking out now? Y'all are crazy. The Chiefs own us. They do. They definitely do own us. But I think it's the way that they lost. I think the fact that we are, even if we win this week, we're 8 weeks in, 0 quality wins, in my opinion, a couple of really bad losses. That says a lot too. And the way that some of these games have played out, where it's like 4 straight weeks we had leads and gave teams opportunities to come back on us. Now, fortunately, only 2 of them were able to, but we've been given those opportunities. So, all right, we've gone down a path of like pretty doom and gloom for the show, which I think is fair with where the 49ers are at. However, there is also a scenario where this team does turn it around. And I think the only way that they can fully turn it around is if Brock and Kyle turn it around, because I don't think Kyle's been his best with his play calling. Brock certainly hasn't played his best with his turnovers, but they can turn it around. So why do you think we should be confident that they can turn it around based off of what we've seen so far this season?
Well, I mean, and the last part you said is based off of what you've seen this season. I don't know if this is
Yeah, or just not necessarily this season. I guess just in the past is totally fair. Just for what you know about these two, why do you think they can turn it around?
I mean, I think the easiest low hanging fruit is they've been nothing but be successful as a duo, right? Ever since
Mhm.
they've been paired up, this team has done no less than NFC Championship. And even then, I think most people are confident that if he didn't tear his whole elbow ligament, that it could have been back to back Super Bowl.
Mhm.
I think that the way that they were playing, at least initially, that they could have not easily, but they were definitely a team that could beat the Eagles. They just didn't have a viable quarterback. So I mean, if you're looking at past experience as to tell you what the future is beholden to, these guys don't know what else to do than to win. I think also, Jesse, like there have been, I don't know if there's a game, and maybe this is even though they lost, to Kansas City, I think there were moments there where if a certain play, like you mentioned, if that pass to Kittle was leading him into the end zone versus having him stop, and things like that, the whole game, the game might change, as far as score and what happens in that as well. I think that even though that this team has lost games, they still, they're still a team that everybody knows on any given Sunday can dominate you, right? So, but focusing specifically on Kyle and Brock, they're losing, but they're not doing what they usually do, right? So if they start doing what they usually do, then you would think that they could start winning again. Like they're not, Kyle Shanahan has been atrocious in the red zone with his play calling. If Kyle Shanahan stops being atrocious in the red zone with his play calling, those field goals turn into touchdowns. Now all of a sudden, they're winning games instead of losing close games, right? So to me, the fact that we're both saying they aren't playing their best, Kyle at coaching, Brock at playing quarterback, that at least is a reason why they're losing. If they fix that, then ultimately you would expect them to start winning. If they were doing everything the right way, Jesse, and they're losing, then it's like, now what do you do? At least if they get play better, play call better, it could lead to better games.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, basically what you're saying is they're not losing because the opportunities haven't been there. The opportunities have been there. They just haven't been taking advantage of those opportunities the way that they have in the past. And if they've done it before, why couldn't they do it again? You're right. I mean, but we've seen it. We've seen Kyle twice turn it around when it seemed like this team was dead. I mean, it was bad when they went 3-5. Remember, they went into the bye week, then they came out of the bye week and lost to the Colts, I believe. And it was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Like you figured after a bye week, you'd be able to figure it out, and you just couldn't. And it was awful. It felt really bad at that time, and they were able to turn it around. And that was a big thing. So being there before is certainly does account for something. At least you know that this coach can do it. Now, maybe this team is different and there's injuries, and so they just won't be able to. But can he? Yes, because he has done it before. He has turned it around. And then when you look at it, just mental makeup and what Brock Purdy's been through, I mean, it's not like this dude hasn't been an underdog in his whole entire life, you know, since college going into the NFL. Now, as a prospect, he wasn't an underdog. I think a lot of people like to paint him as some underdog. He was scouted by Alabama, so he wasn't an underdog as a prospect. But coming out of college into the NFL, he was about as big of an underdog as you could be, and he's proven everybody wrong. So if you can do that, if you can make it and be a starting level player in this league and play well, who's to say that you can't turn it around now? Who's to say this is who you have to be? He just has to play within himself. And it's crazy because, year one, it was like, oh, he doesn't throw downfield at all. And then, last year I felt like he found really, really good balance where he threw downfield a lot more, but he still had the checkdowns. And then this year is the other extreme where it's like, dude, you don't check the ball down. You just throw downfield all the time. So year one and year three are like wide ends of the spectrum. Year two, we found that perfect balance. He just needs to get back to that. He's done it before. He had a whole season where he did have that perfect balance. He can do it again. And I think if they can win and get into a bye week, I think they're going to beat Tampa out of the bye week because Tampa is really down some of their best players. I mean, everything that makes them dynamic in Tampa is now out of the building for that matchup. So that's got to make you feel good. And then maybe a bye week, taking a step back, going home for a week, being with your wife, your family, coming back with a new, fresh perspective, watching film, he'll really be able to turn things around. And I think that that's very possible. So I think those are reasons why you should be confident in Kyle. and Brock to be able to turn it around coming out of the bye week.
Now, the real question is, are you confident that they turn it around?
Kind of. And here's what I mean by that. I think Kyle and Brock will do better the second half of the season. I don't know that the team still is good enough to overcome and win, because the second half of that schedule is brutal. It is very tough. I mean, they have tough games on the road, back-to-back cold weather against good teams. Chicago, I think, is much better than what people realize. The Rams will be healthy. And even Miami. Miami is not like a team that would normally like even get my heart rate up. But remember, you're flying from West Coast to East Coast, and Tua, assuming he doesn't get hurt again, will be there, which means they're even a different team. So no, I'm not confident that the team will just go on this run and turn it around. I am confident, however, that Kyle and Brock will be better in the second half than they have been in the first half. So
I like it.
So
Optimistic
kind of.
Jesse. You don't see him very often on the show, but
sometimes he comes out though. Sometimes he does
every
come out.
now and then.
Yeah. Daza says, if the Niners keep Brock Purdy, hopefully they finally invest high picks in the O-line. Don't understand how an offensive coach doesn't care about the O-line. I want to throw this out there because Bo Limmer was very much available to be drafted by the San Francisco 49ers, okay? They instead drafted Jarrett Kingston, and then Bo Limmer went to the Rams. Bo Limmer was the highest graded offensive lineman last week, not by PFF. I think it was ESPN it was the 33rd team, I think. Anyways, that's crazy. I mean, we're talking about what, a 5th or 6th round pick. They had their opportunity to get their center. Imagine if they had gotten Bo Limmer that late in the draft and you were able to get a center and your right guard or left guard, whatever Pooney ends up being, guard of the future and center of the future. Now the middle of your offensive line is solidified for many years to come off of a 3rd and a late round draft pick. That would be absolutely crazy. Bo Limmer is playing out of his mind right now, starting because of some of the injuries, and they took Jarrett Kingston. So, I wish that they had done that. Tommy says Nick Sorensen is Wonder Bread. Bench Booty Brendo. Fire Schneider immediately. Cut Brick Handbell. I love how you have a nickname for all these people. And why didn't Evan Anderson play against Kansas City? I love the rotation the week before. I felt like the rotation was like trimmed down this week, but I did like the defensive line rotation the week before. They really did a good job, and this week not so much. So, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Yep, Bo Limmer. I know. It sucks. It is what it is. Anyways, that being said, Sunil, thank you for joining me on a Thursday night. Much appreciated. Now, everybody, we got a big game in the division tonight for Thursday Night Football. This is a great Thursday Night Football game. If the Rams win, all of a sudden, I think they become very, very scary. And I think it's a big possibility. Puka Nacua is playing. Cooper Kupp is playing. They got one of their starting offensive linemen back. They also got a secondary starter in the secondary back. So I think they got a good chance. And remember, everybody that's played the Lions this year has lost the following week. The Vikings just played the Lions. Does that trend continue? This is a big, big game in the division. Have fun checking it out. Sunil, appreciate y'all. Chat, much love. Unless something crazy happens, I will be back on Sunday for the post-game rant. We'll see you then. Much love. Peace.